The blood staining the snow at her feet should have been the first warning that Rose Jennings was running from something far worse than the blizzard that howled through the Colorado mountains. But Samuel Collins was too focused on the way her lips had turned blue to care about anything except getting her warm. He had been riding back to Las Animas after checking on his herd in the high pastures when he spotted the dark shape collapsed against a pine tree, nearly buried under the accumulating snow. December of 1884 had brought the worst winter storms Colorado had seen in years, and no one with any sense ventured this far from town in such weather. Samuel dismounted from his sorrel gelding and ran toward the figure, his boots crunching through the knee-deep powder. She was barely conscious when he reached her, a young woman wrapped in nothing but a torn calico dress and a thin shawl that had done nothing to protect her from the freezing temperatures. Her long auburn hair was matted with ice, and her fingers were so stiff she could not even grip his coat when he knelt beside her. "Can you hear me?" Samuel asked, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. Her eyelids fluttered, revealing green eyes glazed with pain and exhaustion. "Please," she whispered, the word barely audible over the screaming wind. "He will find me." Samuel did not hesitate. He shrugged out of his heavy sheepskin coat and wrapped it around her trembling body before lifting her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, and he could feel every one of her ribs through the thin fabric of her dress. "I have got you now," he said, pulling her close against his chest. "I will keep you warm always." The words came out with a certainty that surprised him, but there was something about the way she looked at him in that moment, something in those desperate green eyes that made him feel like he had just made a promise he would spend the rest of his life keeping. Getting back onto his horse while holding her was a challenge, but Samuel managed it, settling her across his lap and wrapping them both in a wool blanket he kept tied behind his saddle. She pressed her face against his chest, seeking whatever warmth she could find, and he urged his horse forward through the storm. The ride back to his ranch took over an hour, every minute of it tense with worry that she might not survive. Samuel kept talking to her, nonsense mostly, just to keep her awake. He told her about his ranch, about the dozen head of cattle he was trying to build into a proper herd, about the cabin he had built with his own hands 3 years ago when he was just 20 years old. She did not respond, but he felt her breathing against his chest, steady if shallow. By the time his cabin came into view through the swirling snow, full darkness had fallen. Samuel dismounted carefully and carried the woman inside, kicking the door shut behind them. The fire in the hearth had burned down to embers, but the cabin was still warmer than the deadly cold outside. He laid her on his bed and quickly built up the fire until flames were crackling and heat began to fill the small space. His hands shook as he worked to remove her frozen clothing. It was improper, he knew, but she would die if he left her in those wet things. He averted his eyes as much as possible, replacing her torn dress with one of his clean flannel shirts and wrapping her in every blanket he owned. Her feet were the worst, the toes an alarming shade of white that made his stomach clench with fear. Samuel filled a basin with lukewarm water and began the slow process of warming her extremities, knowing that heating them too quickly could cause more damage. She moaned in pain as feeling began to return to her fingers and toes, and tears leaked from the corners of her closed eyes. "I know it hurts," Samuel said softly, continuing his careful work. "But you are safe now. No one is going to hurt you here." Her eyes opened then, focusing on his face with an intensity that made his breath catch. "You do not know what you have done," she whispered. "You should have left me there." "That was never an option," Samuel replied firmly. He dried her feet gently and wrapped them in soft wool socks before tucking the blankets more securely around her. "What is your name?" She hesitated so long he thought she might not answer, Finally, she said, Rose Jennings. Well, Miss Jennings, I am Samuel Collins, and you are in my home about 5 miles outside of Las Animas. When you are feeling stronger, you can tell me who did this to you and who you are running from. But for now, you need to rest. He will kill you if he finds me here, Rose said, her voice breaking. Marcus Thornton does not let go of what he believes belongs to him. The name meant nothing to Samuel, but the fear in her voice told him everything he needed to know. Let him try, he said quietly. I might be just a rancher, but I am not in the habit of handing women over to men who hurt them. Something shifted in Rose's expression, a crack in the wall of terror that had been holding her together. A sob escaped her throat, and then another, and suddenly she was crying in great gasping heaves that shook her entire body. Samuel sat on the edge of the bed and let her cling to his hand while she wept, offering what comfort he could with his presence. When her tears finally subsided, exhaustion claimed her. Samuel watched her sleep for a long moment, studying the bruises he had noticed on her arms and the half-healed cut above her eyebrow. Whoever this Marcus Thornton was, he had hurt her badly. The protective fury that rose in Samuel's chest surprised him with its intensity. He barely knew this woman, yet every instinct he possessed was screaming at him to keep her safe. He spent the night in his rocking chair by the fire, a rifle across his lap, listening to the storm rage outside and the soft sound of Rose's breathing. Sleep came in fitches, his mind too active with questions and possibilities. Dawn brought a temporary break in the snowfall, though the sky remained heavy and gray with the promise of more to come. Rose woke slowly, her eyes darting around the unfamiliar cabin before settling on Samuel. "You stayed," she said, surprise evident in her voice. "Where else would I go?" "This is my home," Samuel replied, rising to add wood to the fire. "How are you feeling?" "Like I was left to freeze to death," Rose said, attempting a weak smile. She pushed herself up to sitting, wincing at the obvious pain in her body. "But alive, thanks to you." Samuel busied himself making coffee and breakfast, aware of her eyes following his every movement. When he brought her a plate of eggs and bacon with thick slices of bread, she stared at it like she could not quite believe it was real. "Eat," he said gently. "You need your strength back." Rose ate slowly at first, then with increasing hunger, finishing every bite. Color had returned to her cheeks, and her hands no longer trembled quite so badly. When she finished, she looked at him with those striking green eyes and said, "I should tell you the truth. You deserve to know what you have gotten yourself into." Samuel poured them both coffee and settled into his chair. "I am listening." The story that unfolded over the next hour made Samuel's blood run cold. Rose had come to Colorado 6 months earlier from Kansas, hired as a singer in a saloon in Pueblo, about 60 miles from Las Animas. Marcus Thornton owned the saloon along with half the businesses in town, and he had decided Rose would make a fine addition to his collection of possessions. When she refused his advances, he became obsessed, following her, making threats, using his considerable influence to ensure she could not find work anywhere else. 3 days ago, Thornton had cornered her in her boarding house room and attacked her. Rose had managed to fight him off long enough to escape through a window, but in her panic, she had run without proper clothing or supplies. She had been trying to reach Las Animas, having heard there was a stagecoach that passed through that could take her further away, when the storm caught her. "I walked for 2 days," Rose said, staring into her coffee. "I thought I was going to die up there in those mountains. Part of me almost welcomed it because at least then he could not touch me anymore." "You are not going to die," Samuel said firmly, "and Thornton is not going to touch you again. You can stay here as long as you need to. When the weather clears and you are strong enough, We will figure out where you want to go and how to get you there safely." Rose looked at him with wonder. "Why would you do this for a stranger? You do not know me. I could be lying about everything." Samuel met her gaze steadily. "You are not lying. I can see it in your eyes, hear it in your voice. And even if I had doubts, I could never forgive myself for turning you out into that storm. My mother raised me better than that." "Where is your mother now?" Rose asked softly. "Dead these 5 years," Samuel replied. "Fever took both my parents when I was 18. My father had just enough money saved to buy this land, and I used it to build this place. It has been just me since then." "I am sorry," Rose said sincerely. "That must have been terribly hard." "It was," Samuel admitted. "But it taught me to stand on my own 2 feet, and it made me appreciate the value of human kindness. My neighbors helped me that first year, taught me what I needed to know about ranching, made sure I did not starve. I would be a poor excuse for a man if I did not pay that kindness forward when someone needed help." They talked through the morning, the conversation flowing easier than Samuel would have expected. Rose had a quick wit and a sharp intelligence that shone through despite her exhaustion and fear. She told him about growing up in Kansas, about her love of music, about the dreams she had harbored of maybe someday performing in a real theater instead of smoky saloons. "My mother had the most beautiful voice," Rose said, a distant smile on her face. "She used to sing us to sleep every night, my sisters and me. When she died, I was 14. I kept singing because it made me feel close to her somehow." "I would like to hear you sing sometime," Samuel said, "when you are feeling up to it." Rose's smile turned sad. "I am not sure I remember how anymore. It has been so long since I sang for any reason except survival." The storm returned that afternoon with renewed fury, wind howling around the cabin and snow falling so thick Samuel could barely see his barn 30 yards away. He needed to check on his horse and the milk cow he kept, so he bundled up and fought his way through the drifts. When he returned, stamping snow off his boots, he found Rose standing by the window, wrapped in a blanket and watching the storm with haunted eyes. "You think he is out there?" she asked quietly. "Looking for me?" "Not in this weather," Samuel assured her. "No one could track anything through this. And even if Thornton somehow knew which direction you went, Las Animas is a small town. Strangers get noticed. If he comes around asking questions, word will spread." "You do not know him," Rose said, her voice tight with fear. "He has men who work for him, men who will do anything for money. He could send them here." Samuel crossed to stand beside her. "Rose, look at me." When she turned those frightened green eyes to his face, he continued, "I promise you, I will not let anyone hurt you. I have lived in this territory long enough to know how to handle myself, and I have friends who will back me up if needed. You are safe here." Rose searched his face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I want to believe you." "Then believe me," Samuel said simply. The days that followed fell into an unexpected rhythm. The storm continued off and on, making travel impossible and keeping them confined to the cabin. Samuel was acutely aware of the impropriety of the situation. An unmarried man and woman alone together. But there was no help for it. Rose's reputation had likely been destroyed the moment Thornton set his sights on her anyway, and survival took precedence over social conventions. Rose's strength returned gradually. By the 3rd day, she was moving around the cabin without wincing, helping with cooking and cleaning despite Samuel's protests that she should rest. He realized she needed to feel useful, needed to prove her worth somehow, so he let her take over the kitchen duties and found himself eating better meals than he had managed in months. They talked constantly, sharing stories of their pasts, their hopes, their fears. Samuel learned that Rose was 22 years old, just a year younger than him, and that she had been on her own since she was 16, after her father remarried a woman who made it clear his 3 daughters from his first marriage were not welcome. Rose learned that Samuel had always dreamed of building a proper ranch, of having a place that was truly his own, of maybe someday having a family to fill the quiet spaces. On the 4th night, Rose sang for him. It started soft, almost tentative, a lullaby her mother had taught her. Her voice was rusty from disuse but still beautiful, rich and pure in the firelight. Samuel sat frozen in his chair, transfixed by the sight and sound of her. When the song ended, she looked at him with tears shining in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "I thought I had lost that part of myself." "You have not lost anything," Samuel said, his voice rough with emotion. "You are still you, Rose. Thornton might have hurt you, but he did not break you." Something passed between them in that moment, an understanding that went deeper than words. Samuel felt it in his chest, a tightening that was part fear and part exhilaration. He was falling for this woman, he realized with sudden clarity. Falling hard and fast in a way he had never experienced before. The weather finally cleared on the 5th day, revealing a landscape transformed by snow. Everything was white and pristine, beautiful in the way that winter could be when you were safe and warm inside. Samuel knew he needed to ride into Las Animas to buy supplies and to get word about whether anyone had been asking about a missing woman. He was reluctant to leave Rose alone, but she insisted she would be fine. "I have your rifle," she said, demonstrating that she knew how to load and fire it. "And honestly, after 5 days cooped up in here, I think we both need a few hours apart before we drive each other mad." Samuel laughed, acknowledging the truth in her words. "I will be back before dark. Keep the doors locked and do not open them for anyone except me." The ride to Las Animas took longer than usual, his horse struggling through the deep snow. The town was a small collection of buildings clustered along the Arkansas River, a stopping point for travelers heading west or north into the mountains. Samuel had lived here long enough to know most of the residents by name, and he was counting on that familiarity to help him gather information. He started at the general store, where Mrs. Patterson greeted him with her usual cheerfulness. "Samuel Collins, we were starting to worry about you up there in the mountains. That was quite a storm." "That it was," Samuel agreed, filling a basket with supplies. "Lost power to dig out finally." "Say, has there been anyone new in town lately? Any strangers passing through?" Mrs. Patterson's expression turned thoughtful. "Now that you mention it, there was a man here 2 days ago, right before the worst of the storm hit. He was asking about a young woman, red-haired, said she was his sister and he was worried about her. Sheriff Dawson did not much care for his attitude, though. There was something off about him." Samuel kept his expression neutral. "Did he say where he was from? Pueblo, I think." "He left when the snow got bad, said he would be back when the roads cleared." "Why do you ask?" "Just curious," Samuel said casually. "You know how it is. Strangers always get folks talking." He paid for his supplies and headed to the sheriff's office, where he found Tom Dawson warming his hands by a pot-belly stove. Dawson was a decent man in his 40s, honest and fair-minded, qualities that were not always easy to find in lawmen. "Samuel," Dawson greeted him. "What brings you to town?" "Needed supplies," Samuel replied. "Mrs. Patterson mentioned you had a stranger asking about a missing woman." Dawson's eyes sharpened. "I did. Fellow named Marcus Thornton, had 2 men with him, rough types. Said his sister ran off and he was worried about her, but something did not sit right with me. The way he described her, it sounded less like concern and more like ownership, if you know what I mean." "I might know something about that," Samuel said carefully. He trusted Dawson, but he needed to be smart about this. Hypothetically speaking, if a woman was running from a man who meant her harm, what would her options be? Dawson leaned back in his chair, studying Samuel's face. Hypothetically, not many good ones. If the man has money and influence, he can make life very difficult. Best thing would be for the woman to get far away, maybe to a place where he cannot reach her, or to find someone willing to stand up to him, which takes a certain kind of courage. What if that woman had witnesses to what he did? What if she could prove he hurt her? That would help, Dawson said slowly. But it would be her word against his, and if he is the kind of man I think he is, he has got lawyers who could tie things up in court for years. She would need solid proof, and even then, justice is not always what it should be. Samuel nodded, taking in the information. Thanks, Tom. I appreciate the honesty. Samuel, Dawson said as he turned to leave, if you know where this woman is, you make sure she is safe. Thornton struck me as the type who does not give up easily, and if you need help, you come find me. I might just be a small town sheriff, but I do not take kindly to men who hurt women. I will remember that, Samuel promised. The ride back to the ranch felt longer than the trip into town, his mind churning with everything he had learned. Thornton had already been to Las Animas, which meant he was actively searching for Rose. The fact that he had left before the storm did not mean he would not be back, especially once the roads cleared enough for travel. Samuel found Rose exactly where he had left her, safe in the cabin with the rifle propped against the wall nearby. She looked up when he entered, her face lighting up with a smile that made his heart skip. "You are back," she said, and there was such relief in her voice that Samuel realized she had been more worried than she let on. "I told you I would be," he replied, setting down his supplies. Then, because he believed in honesty, he added, "Thornton was in town 2 days ago. He left before the worst of the storm, but he will be back." All the color drained from Rose's face. "I need to leave. I have put you in enough danger already." "You are not going anywhere," Samuel said firmly. "Rose, running is not going to solve this. He will just keep following you until he catches up or you end up dead from exposure like you nearly did before. We need a different plan." "What kind of plan?" Rose asked, her voice small. Samuel had been thinking about this on the ride home, turning over options and possibilities. "We get married," he said simply. Rose stared at him like he had lost his mind. "What?" "Think about it," Samuel said, warming to the idea even as he spoke. "If you are my wife, Thornton has no claim on you. He cannot just take you away. And as your husband, I have a legal right to protect you. It gives us solid ground to stand on." "Samuel, you cannot marry me just to protect me from Marcus Thornton," Rose protested. "That is insane." "You barely know me." "I know enough," Samuel countered. "I know you are brave and strong and kind. I know you sing like an angel and you make better biscuits than anyone I have ever met. I know that when I found you in that snow, something in my life shifted, and I do not want to go back to how things were before." Rose was shaking her head, tears streaming down her face. "You are being foolish. I am ruined, Samuel. My reputation is destroyed. I come with nothing but trouble and danger. You deserve better than that." Samuel crossed to her and took her hands in his. "Listen to me, Rose Jennings. I do not care about your reputation. I do not care what people might say. I care about you, and I care about keeping you safe. And if I am being completely honest, I care about the way I feel when you smile at me, and the way this cabin feels less empty with you in it." "You cannot possibly love me," Rose whispered. "It has only been 5 days." "I am not saying I've got it all figured out," Samuel admitted. "But I know what I feel, and I know I want the chance to see where this could go. Marriage gives us that chance and keeps you safe at the same time. Is that really so crazy?" Rose looked up at him, searching his face with those green eyes that haunted his dreams. What if I am not what you think I am? What if I disappoint you? Then we will figure it out together, Samuel said. Rose, I am not asking you to marry me because I think you are perfect. I am asking because I think we could build something real together, something good. And yes, the circumstances are not ideal, but when are they ever? A laugh escaped Rose's throat, watery and uncertain. This is the most ridiculous proposal I have ever heard. Is that a yes? Samuel asked hopefully. Rose bit her lip, conflict clear on her face. Finally, she said, if we do this, it has to be real. I will not trap you in a marriage of convenience, Samuel. If you marry me, I am going to be your wife in every sense of the word, and I am going to spend every day trying to make you happy. But you have to want that too. Samuel felt warmth spread through his chest. I do want that, I want all of it. Then yes, Rose said softly. I will marry you, Samuel Collins, and I will spend my life trying to be worthy of the man who saved me. You already are, Samuel told her. And then, because it felt right, because it was what he had been wanting to do for days, he leaned down and kissed her. It was gentle and sweet, a promise more than passion, but it sent electricity racing through Samuel's veins. Rose's hands came up to rest against his chest, and when they finally pulled apart, she was smiling through her tears. When? She asked. Tomorrow, Samuel said. No point in waiting. The sooner we make this legal, the better protected you are. They rode into Las Animas the next morning under clear blue skies, the world sparkling with fresh snow. Samuel had dressed in his best clothes, a clean shirt and trousers with a vest that had belonged to his father. Rose wore a simple dress she had mended from some of Samuel's mother's old things that he had kept in a trunk. Her hair braided and pinned up in a style that made her look impossibly beautiful. Sheriff Dawson performed the ceremony in his office, with Mrs. Patterson and the town doctor as witnesses. It was quick and legal, the words simple but binding. When Dawson pronounced them husband and wife, Samuel kissed Rose again, and this time there was promise in it, heat that made his blood sing. Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Collins, Dawson said with a genuine smile. Samuel, you are a lucky man. Do not I know it, Samuel replied, unable to look away from Rose's glowing face. They celebrated with dinner at the town's only restaurant, a small establishment run by a Chinese family who served the best dumplings Samuel had ever tasted. Rose laughed more than he had ever heard her laugh, the fear that had shadowed her eyes finally beginning to lift. For a few hours, they were just two newlyweds enjoying their wedding day, the dangers lurking in the background temporarily forgotten. The reality came crashing back when they stepped outside and found Marcus Thornton waiting in the street. He was a tall man in his 40s, impeccably dressed in a suit that must have cost more than Samuel made in a year. His face was handsome in a cold, cruel way, and his eyes locked onto Rose with an intensity that made Samuel's skin crawl. There you are, Rose, Thornton said, his voice smooth and controlled. I have been looking everywhere for you. You gave me quite a scare, running off like that. Rose pressed closer to Samuel's side, her hand gripping his arm. Leave me alone, Marcus. I am not going back to Pueblo. Thornton's smile was predatory. Do not be difficult, darling. You belong with me. We both know it. Now come along before you make more of a scene. The lady said no, Samuel said evenly, stepping forward to put himself between Rose and Thornton. And she is not going anywhere with you. Thornton's eyes flicked to Samuel, dismissive and contemptuous. Who the hell are you? Samuel Collins, her husband, Samuel replied, letting the words sink in. We were just married this morning, so whatever claim you thought you had on Rose, it is gone now. For a moment, genuine rage flashed across Thornton's face before he masked it with another cold smile. Married. How convenient. Tell me, Collins, did my Rose mention that she is a thief, that she stole a rather valuable necklace from me before she ran? I did not steal anything, Rose burst out. You tried to force it on me and I left it behind when I escaped. Interesting story, Thornton said. Unfortunately, I have a bill of sale for that necklace with your signature on it. In the eyes of the law, you took something that belongs to me. Samuel felt Rose trembling beside him and realized this was part of Thornton's plan, a way to drag her back under the pretense of legal action. If Rose signed anything, it was under duress, he said firmly. And I am sure a judge would be interested to hear about how she ended up with those bruises. Bruises? Thornton's expression was all innocence. I have no idea what you mean. Rose was always a clumsy girl, prone to accidents. Sheriff Dawson chose that moment to step out of his office, clearly having heard the commotion. Is there a problem here, gentlemen? No problem, Sheriff, Thornton said smoothly. I was just explaining to Mr. Collins here that his new bride is wanted for theft in Pueblo. I have come to escort her back to face charges. Dawson looked at Rose, then at Samuel, his expression unreadable. That is a serious accusation, Mr. Thornton. Do you have proof of this theft? I have paperwork back at my hotel, Thornton replied. I would be happy to show it to you. You do that, Dawson said. And while you are at it, I will send a wire to the sheriff in Pueblo and see what he has to say about all this. In the meantime, Mrs. Collins is not going anywhere. Thornton's jaw tightened. I see. Well, I suppose I have no choice but to follow proper procedures. But I will be back, Sheriff, and when I am, I expect the law to be upheld. He turned and walked away, his two hired men falling into step behind him. Samuel watched until they disappeared into the hotel, his heart pounding with adrenaline. Thank you, Tom, he said to Dawson. The sheriff nodded. I meant what I said. I do not trust that man, but Samuel, if he does have proof of theft, my hands might be tied. You need to be prepared for that possibility. He does not have proof because there was no theft, Rose said, her voice shaking. He is lying. I believe you, Dawson assured her. But belief and proof are two different things in the eyes of the law. You two should head home and stay there for now. I will see what I can find out. The ride back to the ranch was tense and quiet. Samuel could feel Rose's distress radiating off her in waves, and he did not know what to say to comfort her. When they finally reached the cabin, Rose slid off the horse and stood in the snow, staring at nothing. He is not going to stop, she said hollowly. He will find a way to take me back, and when he does, he will make sure I never have another chance to escape. Samuel dismounted and went to her, pulling her into his arms. I will not let that happen. We will figure this out, Rose. I promise you. You cannot promise that, Rose said, her voice muffled against his chest. You cannot control what happens. Maybe not, Samuel admitted, but I can control how hard I fight. And I swear to you, Rose, I will fight for you with everything I have. They stood there in the snow for a long time, holding each other while the sun sank toward the horizon. Finally, Rose pulled back and looked up at him with red-rimmed eyes. I am sorry, she whispered. I am sorry I brought all of this into your life. Stop apologizing, Samuel said gently. You did not bring trouble. Thornton did, and you have nothing to be sorry for. That night, they consummated their marriage in the firelight, coming together with a desperate intensity born of fear and need and the first stirrings of genuine love. Samuel was gentle with Rose, conscious of her past trauma, but she responded to his touch with a passion that left them both breathless. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, Rose's head on Samuel's chest and his arms wrapped protectively around her. I did not think it could be like that, Rose said softly. I thought all men were like Marcus, that intimacy was just about power and control. Samuel pressed a kiss to the top of her head. It should never be like that. It should be something two people share because they want to, because they care about each other. I care about you, Samuel, Rose said, tilting her head to look at him. I know it is fast and probably crazy, but I care about you so much it scares me. Then we are both scared together, Samuel replied. Because I care about you too, Rose, more than I thought possible. The next few days were a strange combination of bliss and dread. Inside the cabin, Samuel and Rose were just newlyweds learning each other, sharing meals and stories and stolen kisses. But always in the background was the knowledge that Thornton was still in Las Animas, waiting for his chance to strike. Word came from Sheriff Dawson on the third day. The sheriff in Pueblo had confirmed that no theft charges had been filed against Rose Jennings, which meant Thornton's accusation was fabricated. It should have been good news, but instead, it only enraged Thornton further. He began making threats, telling anyone who would listen that Samuel Collins had stolen his property and would pay for it. Samuel knew things were coming to a head when he rode into town for supplies and found Thornton waiting outside the general store with his two men. They were clearly trying to intimidate him, standing in a line that blocked the entrance. "Collins," Thornton said coldly, "we need to have a conversation about your wife." "She is my wife, not yours," Samuel replied calmly. "There is nothing to talk about." "I think there is," Thornton said, stepping closer. "You see, Rose and I had an understanding before she ran away. I had invested considerable time and money into her, and I do not appreciate having my investment stolen." "Rose is not an investment or a piece of property," Samuel said, his temper rising. "She is a human being who made her own choice. You need to accept that and move on." Thornton's face hardened. "I do not think you understand the situation, Collins. I always get what I want one way or another. You can hand her over willingly, or I can make your life very difficult. Your choice." "Then I guess my life is about to get difficult," Samuel said, "because Rose is not going anywhere." He pushed past Thornton and his men, half expecting them to try something, but they let him pass. The look in Thornton's eyes promised this was far from over, though. Sheriff Dawson was waiting inside the store. "I heard what happened out there. Samuel, you need to be careful. Thornton is connected. He has friends in the territorial government, judges on his payroll. If he decides to come after you legally, he could make things very hard." "What should I do?" Samuel asked, frustration bleeding into his voice. "Document everything," Dawson advised. "Every threat, every intimidation attempt, and keep Rose close. I will do what I can to run Thornton out of town, but my authority only goes so far." That night, Samuel sat Rose down and told her about the confrontation. He expected her to be frightened, and she was, but there was also a steely determination in her eyes that had not been there before. "We need to take the fight to him," Rose said. "Stop reacting and start acting." "What do you mean?" Samuel asked. "Marcus is used to women being afraid of him, to people backing down when he applies pressure," Rose explained. "What if we do not back down? What if we make it clear that we are not going anywhere and that we are prepared to expose exactly what kind of man he is?" It was risky, but Samuel saw the logic in it. "How do we do that?" "I start singing again," Rose said. "Right here in Las Animas. I tell my story, let people know what Marcus did. Public opinion might not be the law, but it is powerful in a small town. If people know the truth about him, his threats carry less weight." Samuel considered it. It could work, or it could make him more dangerous. "He is already dangerous," Rose pointed out. "At least this way, we are doing something instead of just waiting for him to make his move." They brought the idea to Sheriff Dawson the next day, and after some thought, he agreed it had merit. "The truth is, Thornton only has power if people believe his version of events. If Rose can convince the town otherwise, it changes the dynamic. The plan was set for the following Saturday night. Mrs. Patterson agreed to host a social evening at her home, a regular occurrence in Las Animas where the townsfolk gathered for music and conversation. Rose would sing, and if the opportunity arose, she would tell her story. The days leading up to Saturday were tense. Thornton and his men were still in town, watching and waiting. Samuel made sure Rose was never alone, accompanying her everywhere. At night, he kept his rifle close and slept lightly, ready for trouble. Saturday evening came with clear skies and cold temperatures. Samuel and Rose dressed carefully and rode into town together, Rose's nervousness palpable. Nearly everyone in Las Animas had turned out for the social, curious about the woman who had married Samuel Collins so suddenly. Mrs. Patterson welcomed them warmly, and soon Rose was standing in the center of the parlor, all eyes on her. Samuel saw her take a deep breath, and then she began to sing. Her voice filled the room, pure and achingly beautiful. She started with a hymn, something familiar and comforting that had everyone swaying along. Then she moved into a ballad, a love song that made several women dab at their eyes. By the time she finished her third song, the entire room was enthralled. When the applause died down, Rose spoke. "Thank you all for your kindness in welcoming me to Las Animas. I know there has been talk about my sudden marriage to Samuel, and I think you deserve to know the truth." The room went quiet. Rose's hands trembled slightly, but her voice remained steady as she told her story. She spoke of Thornton's obsession, his assault, her desperate flight through the storm. She showed them the fading bruises on her arms, the scar above her eyebrow. She told them how Samuel had saved her life and offered her safety when she had nowhere else to turn. "I know some of you might judge me for what I am about to say," Rose continued. "But I love my husband. I love him for his kindness and his courage, for the way he treats me with respect and tenderness. Our marriage might have started under unusual circumstances, but it is real, and I will spend the rest of my life being grateful that I found a man who showed me what true goodness looks like." There were tears in the eyes of many listeners. Mrs. Patterson stood and embraced Rose, and soon other women followed. The men shook Samuel's hand, expressing admiration for taking a stand against a bully like Thornton. It was not until the evening was winding down that Thornton made his appearance. He walked into Mrs. Patterson's parlor uninvited, his expression thunderous. "What a touching performance," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "You always did have a gift for playing the victim, Rose." "Get out of my house," Mrs. Patterson said sharply. "You are not welcome here." "I will leave when I am good and ready," Thornton snarled. Then, to Rose, "You think telling lies about me is going to change anything? These people do not know what you really are. You are nothing but a two-bit saloon singer who got ideas above her station." "The only liar here is you," Samuel said, stepping forward. "Everyone in this room has heard the truth now, Thornton. Your word against Rose's does not carry as much weight as you think it does." Thornton turned his cold gaze on Samuel. "You are going to regret this, Collins, both of you. I promise you that." Sheriff Dawson, who had been standing near the door, finally intervened. "That sounded an awful lot like a threat, Thornton. I think it is time you left Las Animas. I have had just about enough of you disrupting the peace of my town." "You cannot make me leave," Thornton said. "I have done nothing illegal." "Maybe not," Dawson agreed, "but I can make your stay very uncomfortable, and if I hear even a whisper of you trying to hurt Samuel or Rose, I will arrest you faster than you can blink. Now get out." For a moment it looked like Thornton might refuse. Then he smiled that cold, cruel smile and said, "Fine. I have business to attend to in Pueblo anyway, but this is not over. Not by a long shot. He left, his men following, and the tension in the room deflated like a punctured balloon. Rose sagged against Samuel, exhausted but relieved. "You did it," Samuel murmured into her hair. "You were amazing." "We did it," Rose corrected. "Together." Thornton left Las Animas the next morning, but his parting words cast a shadow over Samuel and Rose's relief. They knew he would not give up easily, that he was the type of man to hold a grudge and bide his time waiting for an opportunity to strike back. Life settled into a new rhythm over the following weeks. Samuel worked his ranch while Rose transformed the cabin into a real home, adding touches of warmth and beauty that made Samuel smile every time he walked through the door. They were genuinely happy, learning to be partners in every sense of the word. Rose's singing became a regular feature of Las Animas' social gatherings. People would request her, and she discovered a joy in performing that had been stolen by her experiences in Pueblo. Samuel loved watching her sing, the way her face lit up, the way the music seemed to flow through her like a living thing. Winter deepened into January, and with it came news from Pueblo. Sheriff Dawson rode out to the ranch one freezing afternoon with a telegram in his hand and a grim expression on his face. "Samuel, Rose," he said, accepting the coffee Rose poured for him. "I received word from Pueblo. Thornton's saloon burned down 3 nights ago. He was inside. Investigators are calling it suspicious, possibly arson, but Thornton is dead." Rose's cup slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor. "He is dead," she repeated as if she could not quite believe it. "Dead," Dawson confirmed. "Apparently he had made enemies besides you two." The sheriff in Pueblo said several witnesses came forward claiming Thornton had been involved in all sorts of illegal activities, including blackmail and extortion. Seems when he left here, he walked back into a powder keg of trouble he had been building for years. Samuel felt Rose trembling beside him and pulled her close. "It is over then," he said, still processing the information. "It is over," Dawson agreed. "You two can move on with your lives without looking over your shoulders." After Dawson left, Samuel and Rose sat together by the fire, neither quite sure what to say. The threat that had loomed over them was suddenly gone, removed by forces beyond their control. "I should feel relieved," Rose said quietly. "And I do, but I also feel strange. I spent so long being afraid of him, and now he is just gone." "It is going to take time to believe you are really safe," Samuel said. "But you are, Rose. We both are. We can just be a normal married couple now, living our life." Rose turned to look at him, tears glinting in her eyes. "I love you, Samuel Collins. I do not think I have said that clearly enough. I love you with everything I am." "I love you too," Samuel replied, the words coming easily now. "I think I started falling for you the moment I saw you in that snow, but every day since then has just made me more sure. You are it for me, Rose. You are everything." They made love that night with a sweetness and tenderness that felt different from before, unencumbered by fear or urgency. It was a celebration of their survival, their love, their future. Spring came to the Colorado mountains with a rush of melting snow and greening meadows. Samuel's herd had survived the winter, and he was able to purchase additional cattle with money he had saved. Rose planted a garden outside the cabin and talked about maybe getting chickens. They were building a life together, piece by piece. In April, Rose discovered she was pregnant. She told Samuel one evening over dinner, simply and without fanfare, and watched his face transform with joy. "A baby," he breathed, reaching across the table to take her hands. "Rose, we are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Rose asked, though she could see the answer in his eyes. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Samuel said. He came around the table and pulled her to her feet, holding her gently. "You have given me everything, Rose." A home, a purpose, and now a child. I do not know what I did to deserve you, but I am grateful every single day." Rose laughed through happy tears. "I am the lucky one, Samuel. You saved my life in every way that matters." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Rose bloomed with it, her beauty taking on a new radiance that left Samuel breathless. He became fiercely protective, insisting she rest more and let him take over the heavier chores. Rose complained about being coddled but secretly loved the attention. Las Animas had fully accepted them by then. Rose's singing was in demand at every social function, and Samuel had earned respect for his hard work and honest dealings. They had friends, a community, a place where they belonged. In November, as the first snows began to fall, Rose went into labor. The town doctor was summoned along with Mrs. Patterson and several other women who had experience with childbirth. Samuel paced outside the bedroom, listening to Rose's cries and feeling utterly helpless. It was a long labor, lasting through the night and into the next day. When Samuel was finally allowed into the room, he found Rose exhausted but glowing, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. "It is a boy," she said softly. "A healthy, perfect baby boy." Samuel approached the bed on trembling legs and looked down at his son for the first time. The baby had a shock of dark hair and eyes that would probably turn the same green as Rose's. He was tiny and red-faced and absolutely beautiful. "Can I hold him?" Samuel asked. Rose carefully transferred the baby into his arms. Samuel had never held anything so small, so precious. He felt an overwhelming surge of love and protectiveness that brought tears to his eyes. "What should we name him?" Rose asked. Samuel thought for a moment. "What about Thomas after Sheriff Dawson? He helped us when we needed it most." Rose smiled. "Thomas Collins, I like it." "And maybe James for a middle name after my father." "Thomas James Collins," Samuel said, testing the name. "Welcome to the world, son. Your mama and I are going to give you the best life we can." The early months of parenthood were exhausting but joyful. Samuel marveled at how much he could love this tiny person, at the way his heart expanded to encompass both Rose and Thomas. Rose was a natural mother, patient and loving even when Thomas kept them up half the night with his crying. They celebrated Thomas's first Christmas with a small tree that Samuel cut from the forest and decorations Rose made from scraps of fabric and pine cones. It was simple but perfect, the three of them warm and safe while snow fell softly outside. Years passed in a blur of hard work and happiness. Samuel's ranch grew into a prosperous operation. He added onto the cabin, creating more space for their growing family. Rose gave birth to a daughter they named Sarah in 1887, and another son they called William in 1889. The children grew up strong and healthy, surrounded by love and the wild beauty of Colorado. Samuel taught his sons to ride and rope, to care for cattle and land. Rose taught all three children to sing and to read, filling their home with music and laughter. Las Animas grew too, transforming from a small frontier town into a more established community. Samuel served on the town council for a time, and Rose organized a church choir that became known throughout the region. They were pillars of the community, respected and loved. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Samuel and Rose rode back up into the mountains to the place where he had found her in the snow. It was summer now, the meadow filled with wildflowers instead of deadly cold. "Do you ever think about what might have happened if I had taken a different route that day?" Samuel asked, holding Rose close. "If I had not found you, I try not to," Rose admitted. "It is too terrible to imagine. You saved me, Samuel, in every way a person can be saved." "We saved each other," Samuel corrected. "I was just existing before you came into my life. You gave me a reason to be more than just a man surviving. You gave me love and family and purpose." Rose turned in his arms to face him. At 32, she was even more beautiful than she had been at 22, her beauty deepened by maturity and happiness. "I love you more now than I did the day we married," she said. "I did not think that was possible, but every year with you just proves me wrong." "I will keep you warm always," Samuel said, echoing the words he had spoken that first day in the snow. "That is still my promise to you, Rose, for all the days of our lives." "And I will keep your heart safe," Rose replied. "That is my promise to you." They stood there in the mountain meadow, two people who had found each other against all odds, who had built a life of love and meaning from desperate beginnings. The future stretched before them, full of possibility and promise. When they finally rode back down to the ranch, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. They could see their children playing in the yard, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. It was a scene of such perfect domestic happiness that it made Samuel's chest tight with emotion. "We did good, did we not?" Rose said softly. "We did better than good," Samuel replied. "We built something real and lasting. We built a home." That night, after the children were tucked into bed and the house was quiet, Samuel and Rose sat on their porch watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. Rose leaned her head on Samuel's shoulder, and he wrapped his arm around her, holding her close. "You have any regrets?" Rose asked suddenly. Samuel considered the question carefully. "Not a single one. Everything we went through, every moment of fear or uncertainty, it all led us here. How could I regret any of it?" "I used to dream about having a different life," Rose said. "About being a famous singer in a grand theater somewhere. But this, what we have built together, is better than any dream I could have imagined." "You still sing," Samuel pointed out, "and everyone who hears you knows they are witnessing something special." Rose smiled. "I sing for our children now, and for our neighbors, and for you. That is enough. More than enough." They sat in companionable silence, the kind of comfortable quiet that only comes from years of knowing someone deeply. The night air was cool but not cold, carrying the scent of pine and earth and the promise of another good day to come. Inside the house, Thomas stirred in his sleep, and Samuel heard Rose's breathing deepen as she dozed against his shoulder. He thought about the man he had been 10 years ago, alone and lonely even if he had not fully recognized it. He thought about the woman he had found half frozen in the snow, desperate and afraid. And he marveled at how two broken pieces could come together to create something whole and beautiful. The years continued to pass with the steady rhythm of seasons. Samuel's hair began to show silver at the temples, and Rose developed fine lines at the corners of her eyes from years of smiling. Their children grew into capable young people who made them proud. Thomas showed an aptitude for ranching and often talked about expanding the operation when he was old enough. Sarah inherited her mother's musical talent and sang like an angel. William was still young but showed signs of being the scholar of the family, always asking questions and seeking to understand how things worked. Samuel and Rose watched their children with wonder and gratitude, knowing that each of them represented a future that almost did not happen. On cold winter nights, when the wind howled around the house the way it had that night Samuel found Rose, he would pull her close and remember how fragile their happiness had once been. But that fragility had given way to strength over the years. Their love had been tested by hardship and fear, and it had not just survived but thrived. They had built a marriage based on mutual respect and genuine affection, on partnership and trust. It was not always easy, running a ranch and raising children, but they faced every challenge together. On their 15th anniversary, the whole town threw them a celebration. Sheriff Dawson, now retired but still spry, gave a toast recounting how Samuel and Rose had come into his office all those years ago to be married. "I knew then they were something special," he said, raising his glass. "And the years have only proven me right. To Samuel and Rose Collins, the finest couple I know." The gathered crowd cheered and drank, and Rose blushed prettily while Samuel beamed with pride. Later, when they danced together in the town hall, Rose whispered in his ear, "Thank you for making me so happy." "Thank you for choosing me," Samuel replied, "even when you had every reason to run and never look back." "I could never run from you," Rose said. "You are my home, Samuel. Wherever you are is where I belong." As they swayed to the music, surrounded by friends and family, Samuel felt a profound sense of contentment settle over him. This was what life was meant to be, he realized. Not grand adventures or dramatic moments, but this steady accumulation of shared experiences, of memories built one day at a time with the person you loved. The party went late into the night, with Rose singing several songs that had everyone in tears or laughter, depending on her selection. Samuel watched her perform with the same awe he had felt the first time he heard her sing all those years ago in his cabin. She had reclaimed that part of herself that Thornton had tried to steal, had turned her gift into something that brought joy to herself and others. When they finally rode home in the early morning hours, the children having been taken to the Dawsons' house for the night, Samuel and Rose were alone under a canopy of stars that seemed to stretch on forever. "I have something to tell you," Rose said as they neared the ranch. There was a note in her voice that made Samuel look at her sharply. "What is it?" "I am pregnant again," Rose said, smiling in the moonlight. "I know we said 3 was enough, but it seems fate had other plans." Samuel let out a whoop of joy that echoed across the valley. "Another baby." "Rose, that is wonderful. You are not upset?" Rose asked. "We are not exactly young anymore." "Upset? I am thrilled," Samuel declared. He pulled the horse to a stop and reached over to pull Rose into an awkward but heartfelt embrace. "Every child is a blessing, Rose." "How could I be anything but happy?" Their 4th child, a daughter they named Margaret, was born in the spring of 1896. She was their last, and they poured all their accumulated love and wisdom into raising her. By the time Margaret was old enough to understand, her older siblings were nearly adults themselves, and she grew up surrounded by doting family members. Thomas married at 23 to a sweet-natured girl named Emily from a neighboring ranch. They built a house on Collins' land and began raising their own family. Sarah became a music teacher, traveling to various towns to give lessons and perform. William earned a scholarship to a university in Denver, the first Collins to receive higher education. Samuel and Rose watched their children flourish with pride and joy. They had given their family the stability and love they had both craved in their youth. The legacy they were building was not measured in wealth or fame, but in the generations of good people they were helping to create. On quiet evenings, when it was just the two of them again with Margaret tucked into bed, Samuel and Rose would sit on their porch and reflect on their lives. They spoke of their children's accomplishments, made plans for the future, and reminisced about their early days together. "Do you remember when you proposed to me?" Rose asked one such evening, a wry smile on her face. "You made it sound so practical, like we were entering into a business arrangement." Samuel laughed. "I was terrified you would say no. I think I threw out every argument I could think of to convince you." "And now look at us," Rose said, gesturing at the ranch spread out before them. 25 years married, 4 children, more grandchildren on the way. We built something remarkable, Samuel." "We did," Samuel agreed. He took her hand, noting how it fit perfectly in his after all these years. "And I would do it all again in a heartbeat. every struggle, every challenge, all of it, because it led me to you and to this life we share." Rose squeezed his hand. "I was so lost when you found me. I did not think I deserved to be saved, did not think I was worth the effort. But you saw something in me worth protecting, worth loving. You gave me a reason to believe in goodness again." "You saved me too," Samuel said seriously. "I was existing but not really living. You brought color and music and laughter into my life. You made me want to be better, to do better. Everything good I am is because you loved me." As the sun set over the Colorado mountains, painting the world in shades of amber and gold, Samuel and Rose sat together in the home they had built, surrounded by the evidence of a life well lived. Their love story had started in desperation and fear, in a blizzard that should have claimed Rose's life. But from that frozen beginning, they had created warmth and light that would continue long after they were gone. The years continued to pass, bringing both joy and sorrow as years do. They lost Sheriff Dawson to old age, and Mrs. Patterson followed a few years later. But they also gained grandchildren who filled their home with chaos and laughter. Thomas and Emily had 3 boys who showed every sign of continuing the Collins ranching tradition. Sarah married eventually, a musician she met during her travels, and they settled in Denver where she opened a music conservatory. William completed his education and became a lawyer, using his skills to help people who could not afford proper representation. He never forgot the lessons his parents had taught him about standing up for those who could not stand up for themselves. Margaret, their youngest, grew into a spirited young woman who declared she wanted to be a doctor, much to everyone's surprise and delight. Samuel and Rose supported all their children's dreams, no matter how unconventional. They had learned from their own experiences that happiness came from following your heart and having people who believed in you. They were determined to be that support system for their children and grandchildren. As Samuel entered his 60s, he began to slow down, allowing Thomas to take over more of the day-to-day running of the ranch. He found he did not mind the slower pace, enjoying the time it gave him to spend with Rose and to watch his grandchildren grow. Rose's hair had turned silver, but her voice remained strong and clear, and she still sang at every opportunity. On their 40th wedding anniversary, their children organized a grand celebration that brought together everyone whose lives Samuel and Rose had touched over the decades. The house was full of people, noise, and love. Samuel stood in the center of it all, his arm around Rose's waist, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude for the life they had built. 40 years, Rose marveled. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday that you found me in that snow, and sometimes it feels like we have always been together." "I choose to focus on how many years we still have ahead of us," Samuel said firmly. "We are not done yet, you and I." Rose laughed, the sound still as bright and joyful as it had been when she was 22. "No, we are definitely not done. I intend to torment you for at least another 40 years. "I look forward to it," Samuel replied, meaning every word. They danced that evening, moving slowly to music played by their daughter and son-in-law. Samuel held Rose close, feeling the solidity of her in his arms, the reality of her presence after 4 decades together. He thought about the man he had been when he rode out into that blizzard, how lonely and incomplete his life had been. And he thought about the woman who had changed everything, who had taken his practical proposal and turned it into a love story for the ages. "I love you, Rose Collins," Samuel said softly. "I loved you then, I love you now, and I will love you always." "And I love you, Samuel Collins," Rose replied. "My rescuer, my partner, my heart. Thank you for keeping me warm all these years." They stood together on the porch as the celebration continued inside, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. The same stars that had watched over them that first night, that had witnessed every moment of their journey together. Samuel pulled Rose closer, feeling her warmth against his side, and knew with absolute certainty that finding her in that snow had been the defining moment of his life. Everything good, everything meaningful, everything that mattered had stemmed from that single act of compassion. He had lifted a freezing woman out of the snow and promised to keep her warm, and in doing so, he had found his purpose, his partner, his forever. The night air was cool but not cold, carrying the scent of late summer flowers from Rose's garden. Inside the house, their children and grandchildren laughed and talked, the sound of family filling every corner. It was a beautiful cacophony of life and love, a testament to what Samuel and Rose had created together. "We did good, did we not?" Rose asked, echoing words she had spoken many times over the years. "We did better than good," Samuel replied, just as he always did. "We built something that will last long after we are gone. We built love, Rose, the kind that transforms lives and creates futures." They stood together as twilight deepened into night. Two people who had found each other against impossible odds and had chosen every day since to build a life together. Their love story had started with a whispered promise in a blizzard, and it had grown into something vast and enduring, something that would echo through generations. Samuel tightened his arm around Rose, feeling her nestle closer against his side. This, he thought with profound contentment, this was what it meant to be truly wealthy. Not in money or land or possessions, but in love and family, and the knowledge that you had made a difference in the world. The stars above them shone bright and steady, silent witnesses to a love that had weathered every storm and emerged stronger for it. In the Colorado mountains, in a ranch built by hard work and sustained by devotion, Samuel and Rose Collins stood together, warm and safe and loved, exactly as they would continue to stand for all the days of their lives. Their story, which had begun with desperate rescue and evolved into the deepest partnership, was not just about survival. It was about choosing each other, day after day, year after year. It was about building something meaningful in a harsh world, about creating warmth and light in places that had known only cold and darkness. And as the night deepened around them, and the sound of their family's laughter drifted out into the Colorado evening, Samuel and Rose knew with certainty that their love story was one that would be told and retold, a testament to the power of compassion, courage, and commitment. They had started with nothing but a promise whispered in a snowstorm, and they had built an empire of love that would endure long after they were gone.